Well, good afternoon, everyone. Today is October 13th, 2020, and today I'm going to share two visions, a dream, and possibly a dream that I had 2 nights ago, if I have time. So, all of these dreams are kind of related, is why I'm thinking I'm going to share them all three. Because they happened in different years, but to me, when I think about these three dreams, they have to do with God's law, His order and His time. The timing of God, the order of God. So anyway, so that's why I'm going to share these three, and possibly the one I had 2 nights ago. Okay, so my first vision was in 2008, and this was in the summer of 2008, and my mother and father-in-law, could have been even early fall, but it was, maybe somewhere between July, August, September, something like that. Anyway, so I had this experience, vision, where I was staying at my mother's house. They were going out of town, and they had asked me to stay at their house that weekend. And so I was by myself that weekend, and I went to bed one night, and all of a sudden I go into a vision, and I see an angel in the living room. I'm standing in the living room, and then I see an angel, a tall angel that's a blonde-headed angel. And sometimes in visions or dreams, you're just like an observer, and you're just looking in, and the vision or the dream has absolutely nothing to do with you. You're just observing something that might happen, or and then sometimes in visions you can see and still be observing, but you're also a part of the vision, so you actually see yourself in the vision. And then sometimes you're just in the dream, and you're working, you're playing it out. So in this vision, I saw myself standing before an angel, but I'm also observing it. But I knew that was going to have to do with my life. And so in this vision, the angel reaches his hand out, like he stretches his hand out, like he's trying to hand me something. And in his hand, I see a red leather watch. And when I looked at the watch, the face of the watch, as I'm taking it from him, and on the face of the watch, it doesn't have like numbers like a normal watch, but it has like a stick in it, like a sundial, like a straight up little metal stick. And then the angel speaks to me, and he says, "Watch." Well, I knew when he said watch that yes, it was a watch, but that had to do with timing, but also he was telling me to watch. And the fact that it was not a normal like watch that we use in this day and age, but it was like a sundial. That's how they used to have, they used to tell time by the shadow, or the sun, by the sun, and the shadow that would cast upon that. So I knew that the timing, as far as the timing went, that I was like to get my timing from the Son of God, not necessarily the sun that shines, but the Son, of God, and that it would be, God's timing, and that I was to be a watchman, which, I kind of know that. We're really all called to be watchmen, just to be honest with you. We're supposed to watch over our families. We're supposed to, just to be discerning of things. And so that was my first dream, vision. My second one was one that was somewhere between 2002 and 2004. And I was just reminded of this dream when I was watching a video the other night of a young man. Well, actually, it was a couple weeks ago, of a young man that he was praying, and with another man, and during this, they were just really praying, and all of a sudden he was like taken to heaven. And so his experience, which I'll share after my vision, it was like it reminded me of this dream that I'd had. I haven't found my dream. It's somewhere in one of these notebooks. I've got so many notebooks I still have to go through. But in my dream, I am in this huge house. It's a huge antebellum type home, just really, really, really big. And you could tell it was just, I mean, it was just huge. It was just someone very, very wealthy. I'll put it that way. So I'm in this house, and there's all these people, and it's like they're getting ready for something to happen, like a party or something. And so they're all talking, and they're excited, and they're just milling around waiting for this party or whatever it is to happen. And so I kind of like talk to a couple of people going through, but it's like I'm focused on going somewhere. I don't know where in my dream, because you're just led as you dream it. As y'all know, I'm sure. But in my dream, it's like I'm focused on getting, somewhere. And so I keep going, and I go out the back door of this house. And as I go out the back door of this house, I see a guest house or a servant's quarters back there. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's another smaller house. And so I go in there like I'm supposed to be there. And I walk in this house, and I see these trays. There's trays of food, and mostly meat. I see these trays are just piled with meat and food. Just everywhere is just piles and piles. So I realized that they were preparing the food back there. And so all of a sudden I see, as I'm looking around, then I see there's a staircase that goes up. And I look up the staircase, and all of a sudden I see Jesus. And Jesus is starting to come down this staircase where I'm at. And he looks at me like, what are you doing here? I mean, that's just the feeling I got, was like, why are you here? And almost like a corrective type feeling I got in that dream, to be honest with you. And so then as he comes down, he looks at me and he says, why are you here? He said, it's not time yet. You're too early. You can't be here right now. And so then I woke straight up. And what I knew about that dream, is that God was telling me that I needed to be careful of, of being too not to be ahead of God in my timing of things. And because of my personality type, I have lots of dreams and visions. And what he was telling me is that just because he's showing me something right now doesn't mean that it's going to play out right now. And literally, this has taken me a lot of years to understand that. And probably, honestly, only in the last 4 or 5 years have I really come to an understanding of this, even in a greater measure, that when God gives me a dream or a vision, it's not necessarily for today, it's not for right now. Because what I've done for years is like, I'll have a dream and I'll start telling people, well, this is my dream, this is going to happen, y'all pray, let's contend, and yes, you do pray, you contend. But not all dreams that you have are for right now. And and I'll tell you, in 2014, God showed me this coronavirus. And when I had this dream, I actually even shared it on Facebook. And it came across my memories a few days ago, maybe a few weeks ago, actually. And I was like, oh my goodness. Because I had already been telling my mother, my sister, I was like, oh, remember my dream? Remember that dream I had? This is what's happening. And actually, not only that, but God had given me a dream about the cruise ship, how it came. And like both of those dreams, I had literally had, one of them was in 2014 and one of them was a little bit later than that. One of them was probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago. But I had both of those dreams. You know how the cruise ship came over and they had to stay on those cruise ships because they had the coronavirus on there and they had to wait in the port. And anyway, I had a dream about the cruise ship. So it was like when that happened, I was like, oh my goodness, I thought, at the time that those things were going to happen immediately, but they didn't happen for, several years down the road. And so anyway, but, going back to this dream about, me seeing Jesus and him saying, you're not supposed to be here yet. Like he was already preparing, but it wasn't time. And that timing is so important to God. And so anyway, I want to go back to the dream that reminded me of that young man, not a dream, his experience. He was in a prayer meeting, and in this prayer meeting, he was caught up to heaven, and it was the marriage supper of the Lamb. And so he's sitting there, and he knew, he wanted to see Jesus, and he knew that he might not have a lot of time, because he was like, what's going on? I'm at the marriage supper of the Lamb. And, so he started asking people, and they were, like passing food and stuff. And he was like, no. He said, where's Jesus? I want to see Jesus. Have you seen Jesus? And he said, everybody was talking and eating. And they were like, no, I haven't seen Jesus. And no, they haven't seen Jesus. And no, they haven't seen Jesus. And so finally, one of the servants that was serving the food came up, and he said, have you seen Jesus? And he's like, oh, yes, he's over there. And so he immediately got up and went the direction to where the servant, sent the steward or the butler, whatever you want to call them, that was serving the food. And out came Jesus with a servant butler type out garment and a tray, and he was literally serving the marriage supper of the Lamb. And so the Lord, spoke to him some stuff, and I don't remember, everything the Lord spoke to him, but this one particular thing stood out to me that I don't think I'll ever forget this. And he said that the Lord looked at him and he said, you see what I'm doing? I'm serving, I'm serving you. I'm serving, all of you. He said, I want you to go back. He said, and I want you to serve my people. And that stuck with me so much. And so then Jesus did something, and all of a sudden he was back in his body and sitting in a chair in this little prayer meeting with him and this other guy. And he had a Bible in his hand, and he said, and the wind blew or something, and the pages, just like, it was like the wind just blew them open, and the Bible opened up. And he said he knew, he didn't even know how he knew, he was supposed to look down. And when he looked down, the scripture was highlighted to him, and it was about Jesus serving us, basically at the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he was like, then he knew at that moment that he had really been to heaven. So anyway, that reminded me of my dream of, seeing the Lord, in that place of the servants' quarters, preparing, because Jesus is a servant. That was always the message of Jesus, was to serve. And when I think about a servant, I always think about my husband. Y'all, my husband has a heart of a servant. Ever since I've known him, he has had the heart of a servant. Sometimes he's a little bossy, and tries to tell everybody how to do things, because, that's just, I guess, part of his personality type. He's not as bad as he used to be, but he's got this kind of personality that he's good at managing things and seeing things how they're supposed to be. And I used to tell him for years, I'm like, you should have been an engineer, because you are so good and at managing and seeing how things should be and laid out. He's just super good about stuff like that. But also his heart, he just loves, like, ever since we've been married, my husband loves to make me happy. He will do anything. He serves me all the time, y'all. It's just like a natural thing to him. He is just a servant's heart. And, we have a lot of family gatherings, and my husband's he's always out there working, cooking out, or, whatever it takes to do that. And then, soon as everybody, and even when we're getting our food, he's like, making sure we're not, doing something we shouldn't do. And then, like, when everybody's starting to leave, he's cleaning up. He has, like, literally by the time all the people leave, and probably within 20 minutes or so, he has that kitchen spick and span, everything put away. And I'm just like, how did that's a blessing, but he really has a servant's heart. So he has really showed me, by example, how to be a servant. And I just think that's amazing, because we're, as people, we're always trying to get, positions and, whatever, but, God, Jesus said the greatest of all is the servant of all. Anyway, that's not really what this whole thing's about, but I just thought that was really cool. And I really want to honor my husband for that, because truly, for 30 years, that has been his heart. So I want to go next into another, this was a vision, and this one's kind of like going to be the one that I want to really kind of focus on. But this vision was in 2009, February 2009, and I was watching that night. I was watching a minister, and it was late at night, and I don't know where my husband was. He may have been out of town or something. I was by myself in my room though, and I was watching this lady preach, and then it was over, and then after that I just was laying there, and I was just praying as I went off to sleep. And almost immediately I went into a vision, and I know it was immediately because I literally came out of it, and it had only been like 15-20 minutes, the most like 30 minutes. I mean, it had literally just been just a few minutes. So anyway, so I go into this vision right after my conscience, or my, what's the word? My natural thought, it was gone. So, excuse me. So all of a sudden I see myself in this vision, and I am dancing like an Indian, like, and I'm like 2 to 3 foot above the air. I'm dancing in the air. I am dressed like a judge. I have a black judge's, robe on, and I'm holding a gavel in my hand, judge's gavel, and I am just dancing unto the Lord with all my might. I'm just dancing, just dancing in the air, So I know it's spiritual. It's not my natural, because, I cannot do that. None of us can do that without God. So anyway, I'm just dancing, and all of a sudden, I feel the lightning of God start at the top of my head, and it goes through my feet. And let me tell you, I know that in the natural, nobody could survive something like that. Well, they might could survive, but they wouldn't. They'd feel it. But in the spirit realm, things happen to you that it's just unusual sometimes. And so I felt it though, but it didn't hurt. I just felt power go through me like lightning. And then when that happened, I go over with this gavel, and I take this gavel and I hit the ground. And when I hit the ground, it's like lightning hits the ground, and it's like this thunder coming out of my voice, and I say, order in the earth. And when I say this, it's like everything is it's like everything, there's thunder. It's just like thunderous. A thunderous word that I know it wasn't from me, it was from God, because it's like just sometimes the Lord will use our voice to speak his word. And it was like the whole earth shook. So, like I said, that was in 2009. That was February 2009. And so after that, I started like looking things up about the order of God. And I just was thinking, like right after that, I was like, God, I just see no order. There's just so much disorder. Like if you're saying order in the earth, why is there so much disorder? I mean, there's been so much disorder. And even if you look around, like in our country, there's just been so much chaos and so much disorder. Well, just like that vision I had, that dream that I had about Jesus telling me, about don't get ahead of his time. Well, there's laws of God. And I like when I think about, when the Lord shows me something or explains it to me, I like it to be very simple. I don't want the Lord to share something with me that I feel like I have to go to a theological seminary to understand. Does that make sense? I like to be able to explain it to even a child, like my own grandchildren or my children, or just, somebody that would, just not have a lot of understanding of spiritual things, because the Lord is very simple, and he always taught with parables. So I like simplicity. I'm not schooled with theology. I'll look something up, I'll Google it, or I have a Strong's Concordance, and I'll look up the Hebrew and the Greek. But, I'm just not theologically, I just don't understand all the theological things. And so, one thing that, like came to my heart today as I was thinking about the order of God. What is the order of God? Well, the order of God is based on the ways of God. His law, God set up orchestrated laws from the foundation that he himself abides by. And to me, a very easy example of that is the law of seed, time, and harvest. We cannot have a crop of corn without planting some kernels of corn. And then we plant the kernels of corn, in the ground, and then time has to go by, and then we have a harvest. If you don't plant the kernels, you won't have the harvest. Does that make sense? And in that time period, there's things that we have to do. We have to fertilize the corn, you have to water the corn, you have to pull the weeds up, so the corn can be, it has to be good soil. All these things represent kind of like the order of God. It has to be the order of God. Everything on this earth to be right. Now, we can do things out of God's order, excuse me. But for things to be right, for things to be righteous, they have to be according to God's ways. And so that's, kind of like what I want to share is that, this year, to me is such a significant year of God resetting things. And you know, when the coronavirus hit in, I guess, well, it hit a little before March, but in March we were, you know, we had to stay in our homes, and, you know, everybody was like kind of locked in all over the world. It wasn't even just here, like many countries were locked in their homes, and it was literally the Passover that had fell during that same season. And there had been several prophets that I had actually heard, and they said that this was going to be a real Passover this year. So I was thinking about that, you know, after I heard that, you know, and, you know, a couple months went by, and I got to thinking, well, Lord, if this is a real Passover, you know, then there's got to be a real exodus too. An exodus, a moving out of the enslavement of the Christians, the, you know, those who follow the Lord. You know, if we're in a real Passover, then we're going to be in a real Exodus. And so I was thinking about that, and I'm like, no wonder the chaos in the country, no wonder the chaos in the world, because God really, you have to shake out the things that are not according to God's order to reestablish the things that are God's order, if that makes sense. And so I am going to share this fourth dream that I had. You know, today, you know, is the day they're actually, you know, questioning a justice, you know, and so we need to be praying about things like that. We need to be praying about the presidential election. We need to be praying about leaders, governors, you know, senators, Congress people that get put in position, because even though there are no perfect people, and I will prove that. If you go look at the Old Testament, the kings that were set up, those kings, there were some very godly kings in the Old Testament, but there were some very ungodly kings. But even the very most godly kings that ever ruled over Israel still did not get everything right. Some of those kings, when they would die, they would always say, well, this king, you know, did this, and this king did that. But there would always be one or two issues that king failed miserably at, that maybe they didn't pull a stronghold down, a place where they would go worship idols, you know, like Solomon. Solomon was the wisest man to ever lived, and he was a king, and he did many good things, building the temple, many good things, and but still he intermarried with other cultures and other countries that did not serve the God of Israel. And the Lord had warned the children of Israel to never intermarry with other cultures, because they didn't serve God, and that they would cause them to trip up in their faith. And that's exactly what happened to Solomon in his last days, is that he never removed those high places where all his wives, because he had so many wives and so many concubines. It was like 300 wives and 700 concubines, you know, and they entangled him to serve other gods. So that's what I want to say. So even with this presidential election, you know, there's two men and they're not perfect, but we've got to think about, God, what is your will for this country? What is going to set us in order? What is going to establish this country, you know, that's going to, you know, protect our liberties? And I want to share this dream that I had 2 nights ago real quick, and then I'm going to end this video. And it was, I saw 2 armies. I saw this evil, wicked army that looked like an army in the Lord of the Rings. I think that series is. I've watched that series years ago, and I think it's the last one. And it's something about the king. But it's this toward the end of the movie. Actually, it's a lot of the movie. There's this great battle, and in my dream, or vision, whatever it was, a couple nights ago, I saw this wicked army, and it looked like those creatures, those beasts in that Lord of the Ring. I mean, not exactly like them, but I mean, they look like beasts. They didn't look like humans. They were all on these horses, and they were all intent for evil, and they were out for destruction, and they wanted to destroy everything good and positive and righteous. They wanted to destroy the church. And on my right side, I saw a group, not as big, a very small army. I'll put it like that. a very, very small army, and they were all huddled up on the front line, and they were all just like, they were so close together that it was almost like when I was looking that I was thinking, I think they're so close together, number one, to hold each other up, because they were so exhausted from the war that they had been in, up until this point. They were still in battle and they were still fighting, but they weren't on horses, and horses in the Bible represent the strength of man. So they didn't have man's strength. They were completely dependent upon God's strength, and they were a small number. And but in my dream, when I looked at them, even their clothes, they all had white garments on, but they were kind of tattered and torn because they had been in this battle for so long, y'all. And they were so weary. I could tell they were so weary. I remember looking at them and thinking, I don't even know when the last time they had ate or drank something. Like, they looked like they were so weary. And so, but I looked in their eyes, and they had this resolve that if no other Christians showed up to help them, or, no one else in the church, whatever you call them, Christians, I call them Christians. But if no other Christians showed up to help them, that they would still fight, and they would fight till the death. They would fight till the death. If they had to stand and die, they would die for what they believed in, for Jesus and the price that he paid for this country to have freedoms that, our constitutional father put in, because the church, we have been at war. The enemy would love to shut the church down. The enemy would love to put us underground. And so, anyway, so in my dream, 2 nights ago, I knew, and in my dream, I was convicted to pray more and to fast more and to set my heart to, in this next few weeks, to intercede for God's will to be done in this election and in this judicial, decision that they're making. Not my will. God's will, for God's will to be done, because I know that if we are going to have a divine reset where we have an exodus, from under tyranny, and I'm not saying it's Democrat or Republic, because there are evil on both sides, but we want God's righteous people to be put in place in office so that they give us the freedoms that God paid for us to have, and the Constitution, the forefathers, that the Constitution that the forefathers had intent for us to have. So anyway, so my prayers is that we will, get into the order of God. Ask God, what's your order? What's your order for this nation? What do you want me to do? What's my part to play? Because I want to come into the order of God. And without the order of God, there will be chaos in our life. But when we come into God's order, into God's plan and to God's timing, all of these three things have to fit together. It's just like when we plant a seed, that corn don't come up tomorrow. No, there is time. There are elements that have to come together. It's just like when a storm happens, the elements for the rain have to come together. The atmosphere, the temperature, all these things have to happen perfectly for, rain to come. Well, it's the same thing for a harvest. If we want to reap the harvest of this great reset, this great exodus for the body of Christ, because God gave us this year to look deep in our hearts and to return to Him, return to God and the things of God, because a lot of us, I think, had kind of forgot the most important things. I know I had. I know this year for me has been a year of repentance. And, turning my face back toward the Lord and asking God, what is your plan for my life? Where do I fit into your plan? Where do I fit in this next season, Lord? What do you have for me? So ask yourself those questions. Pray, fast, take a day, to fast. If all you have is 10 minutes, I know most people have children and jobs and, and all the things that, that mothers and fathers deal with. And God understands that, but God sees our heart, So anyway, thank y'all so much. I love you, and I really appreciate y'all watching my videos. God bless you.